This episode of Scrolling to Death is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Bark offers parents advanced content monitoring for all of your child's devices. Bark is literally helping to save lives and has alerted parents to millions of life-threatening situations like self-harm and severe bullying. More on Bark in the episode notes. Okay, so Rick, thank you for having this conversation with me. You have been very involved in the TikTok legislation from the beginning, and so I wanted to bring you in to educate parents and listeners about what the heck is going on with TikTok. And today was a huge day. The Supreme Court made a ruling, so can you just tell us what happened today?
Sure. I mean, it was monumental. Obviously, the Supreme Court found that the act itself was content neutral, which is a big issue around what TikTok was trying to argue that was a violation of the First Amendment. But the court said that the act was justified by, quote, the significant government interest in preventing China from collecting sensitive data from U.S. TikTok users. So what that means is the act as a whole is constitutional. TikTok on January 19th, Sunday, will have to basically find other technological means to work in the U.S. because the prohibitions really apply to the app stores and to the data storage companies, that they can no longer provide the technical means to have TikTok operate in the U.S. But TikTok is now saying that they're just going to shut the whole thing down, even though TikTok would still work even without this technical support. They have decided, at least what they're saying right now, that they're going to shut down everybody from TikTok to try to send a message and create chaos in terms of its users, as well as trying to pressure the U.S. government to backtrack on this important national security legislation.
Okay. And Biden made a statement that he's not going to enforce the law, and then he's just punting it over to President Trump. So what does that mean? Doesn't that mean that on Sunday, TikTok wouldn't need to do anything?
No, it's a weird statement, to be honest, because the law is self-executing. There is nothing for the president to do.
Oh.
If the app stores do not comply, they are in violation.
Okay.
And so my expectation, although they haven't said this publicly yet, and I haven't seen anything publicly, is that they will comply with the law. It doesn't matter if the president of the United States says, we're not going to enforce it. As a publicly traded company, they would face potentially significant class holder lawsuits, securities lawsuits, because they are putting massive amounts of their dollars at stake. So there's nothing that you can really do as president but follow the law.
So then what is President Trump talking about? That he's going to come in and overturn the law or make an executive order? He says he's going to save TikTok, but can he actually do anything at all?
I'm curious to see what he does. I can't figure out anything legally he can do with an executive order to stop the law from going into effect.
Okay.
There is a separation of powers. And so imagine if the president decided to do an executive order to allow murder for 24 hours, the purge.
The purge.
You can't do that, right? Congress could actually pass laws to say we're going to do away with murder laws, but a president does not have that power. They cannot overturn a law. There's no executive order that can would veto a law without any oversight. In fact, the Supreme Court just recently, in a huge win for Republicans and the business community, overturned a long-held precedent called the Chevron deference case, which basically allowed the Chevron deference. What people were able to do, or the agencies were able to do, was basically change laws through regulation. And so that has now stopped. So think about an executive order vetoing the law. There's no way. Between the separation of powers, he really can't do anything. But I'm curious to find out what he thinks he can do. Anything like his court filing to the Supreme Court, which wasn't taken very well by a lot of legal scholars. I just don't know what he can do in this case.
Okay. I mean, he's talking a big game about it. And I think I heard he's invited the TikTok CEO into his inauguration box with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Is that true? Have you heard about that?
I have heard that. I mean, it's been reported that the CEO of TikTok's invited. It's interesting to invite the CEO of a company that's been deemed a national security threat to the United States to sit in your presidential box.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is going to be a very different administration, and that's what he ran on. And so we'll see how that works. But it'll be interesting because if TikTok is shut down on the 19th, and then the 20th, they wouldn't be able to put it up on TikTok. So
I know.
The irony of that would be interesting. Again, I can't figure out what legally he can do, because the only way to get the extension, the 90-day extension, is to have basically a certified divestiture agreement on the table.
Okay.
And so you can't say, TikTok can't say, oh, no, I'm going to go to the table. They actually have to have like a term sheet from buyers, real buyers, and then use those 90 days. And so at that point, we'll know, and that there has to be real buyers on the table that are not from a company deemed a national security threat under the legislation. Foreign adversaries, the term they use.
Right.
And it has to pass muster. If not, then even if he says that, oh, this divestiture fits the definition, and it clearly doesn't, the question for the app stores and Oracle is, are they going to actually comply with the law? Or and if they know, their general counsels know that this isn't really meeting the definition. So it's going to put them in an interesting perspective.
Okay. Divestiture meaning ByteDance, the Chinese company ByteDance, selling off TikTok USA to a company that's in a country that's not a foreign adversary.
That's correct.
TikTok or ByteDance has said that that's not happening, right? Like, what do you think the odds are?
Yes.
They've said that. Okay. And so they have announced, even though they don't need to, that they're going to go dark on Sunday, meaning anyone who has the app already downloaded, I've heard when they open it, there'll be a pop-up and they can't access the app. Like, why would they do that rather than let the American users just keep using it until it kind of goes defunct?
I think what they're hoping is that this tactic was done during what was known as the SOPA-PIPA fight, the Stop Online Piracy Act. And it happened actually on January 18th, which is, I'm just thinking about the irony of that.
Yeah, right.
And now it's going to be January 19th. And what companies did, there was an effort to kill this important intellectual property legislation that was moving through Congress very quickly, similar like TikTok. And Google and a bunch of the tech companies decided to make the internet go dark for a day. Now, some of them just put black, like didn't completely shut down, but like Wikipedia went completely dark.
Wow.
And all these other companies went completely dark. And it forced Congress to pull back on its efforts, even though every committee voted the bill out almost unanimously.
Wow.
And so my guess is they think that this will be another SOPA-PIPA moment. And get people to call their members of Congress. But to me, what it shows is why TikTok's a national security risk. That they have the power to go completely dark. They have the power to manipulate the American people around a national security issue that has gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and they've lost. So imagine in a situation where there is some geopolitical issue happening, and they decide to use that power against the United States.
Right.
So again, just like they did when they had young kids calling members of Congress threatening to kill members of Congress or threatening to kill themselves, I think this will backfire. It just highlights the concerns that those of us have around the national security implications of an entity that has access to 170 million American phones.
Okay, so the last few days, TikTok users have been calling themselves TikTok refugees and moving over to another Chinese app called Red Note that doesn't even have a U.S. presence or a U.S. version. What do you think of this move?
Well, I think it's going to be very educational for them, because what they're going to find is that the censorship around Red Note is intense. Like if you try to put something up on that they don't like, they will immediately take it down.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard young TikTok users say, well, there's no difference if it's based in the US or based in China, they're going to see what the difference is around free speech, what real censorship is
Yeah.
when it's not a national security issue.
Okay.
And so I think it's going to be enlightening for them. The legislation that was approved by Congress and signed by the president is broader than just TikTok. So if this app is deemed a national security threat, the president of the United States has the power and I would say has the obligation to do the same thing that we did with TikTok.
With other apps.
With other apps, yes. So this legislation is broader than just TikTok. It applies to any app that the president deems is a national security threat to the United States.
So, okay, so Red Note could be looked into.
Yeah, Red Note could be looked into.
What about Temu?
All of them.
All of them.
Anything, the only ones that were carved out were review sites and like travel review sites and business review sites.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Don't ask me why those were carved out, but they were. But everything else is on the table.
Okay, so this is bigger than a TikTok problem.
Oh, absolutely. This is a national security issue. Any entity that can harm U.S. national security under the definitions of this bill, the president can start enforcing actions against it through the Justice Department.
Okay. When I post about news like this around TikTok, I get a lot of comments saying, well, Instagram is just as bad or Snapchat is just as bad. And what would you say to that?
I say from a child safety perspective, the answer is yes.
Right.
They are. From a data collection perspective, the answer is yes. But from a national security standpoint of undermining U.S. interests I say no. That's a completely different animal when you have a social networking site that is controlled by the government of a foreign adversary to manipulate public opinion or to create harm, to basically have malware on every phone of their users and not have control. I am not worried that Mark Zuckerberg or the people who own Snap or the people who, even Elon Musk is going to utilize its power to undermine U.S. democracy and national interest. Now, the debate of is there misinformation on X and all those other things and harmful content, the awful but lawful? Yes, and we need to address those issues. But that's different than the ability of a foreign adversary being able to weaponize an algorithm through it and its data collection to undermine U.S. interests.
And the child safety issue with TikTok is being addressed in, I think, 14 different attorneys general in different states has brought lawsuits, or is it one lawsuit, 14 lawsuits?
I've lost track of all lawsuits. But again, the child safety issues are real, but it's a separate conversation than what the TikTok divestiture legislation was all about.
Right. Okay. I've been thinking about, there's been a lot of videos saying, make sure you go on TikTok and download all your information and your content that you posted, especially people that have been posting on TikTok for their job and their livelihood. And when I check the settings, it can take several days to get your data available to you to download. And we don't have several days. So this could be a harsh lesson in that when you are making all of your income from a platform where you don't own any of the content that's there, it can all go away and you will lose all of that. And I think, I don't know, it's going to be a harsh lesson for people.
Well, it should be a harsh lesson because, companies can go bankrupt and you'd have this, the same problem. And so the question becomes your, data portability, which is a whole separate issue, right? Being able to have your data in different places. Again, that is not addressed. But one of the things that is addressed in the bill is the ability to access your information and get it. Like they're not saying like they're cut off, but if you can see, they had 270 days to download all their information and put it. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. So
Okay.
The fact that they didn't react in time is their own fault.
Okay.
Because there was plenty of notice. And it wasn't like people didn't know that TikTok had this was coming.
Yeah. Okay, so lastly, advice for parents or anything else that parents should know, particularly in talking to our kids about this, our kids who may be using TikTok and freaking out over it or unsure or hearing misinformation. So what do you have to say to parents?
Well, I think it's going to be another example for parents to understand the power of TikTok and manipulating the information that your children get. The
Hmm.
fact that they're making this a negative against the United States and trying to go after the Supreme Court of the United States and the
Hmm.
Congress. I think that's the message that parents should educate their kids on, that
Hmm.
our democracies are fragile. Democracies are not liked by authoritative governments like China and Russia and Iran, and they're going to use whatever means possible to undermine the structures that we've built here over 200 years to
Hmm.
create the freedoms that we all enjoy day in and day out. And that can't be lost. I was at an event and a younger person said, "How do you sleep at night knowing what you're doing to TikTok?" And I said, "I sleep very well at night because I'm knowing I am helping protect the future, your future,
Hmm.
against authoritarian governments that are out to undermine US democracy."
TikTok achieved their goals very well. They wanted users to think that TikTok is where they're getting all the real information, not to trust any other platform, and not even to trust their parents or their family
That's
members
correct.
or grandparents. Oh, you're only going to trust TikTok. And I've heard that from people that are teenagers and people that are 60 years old that think that TikTok is where they're going to get the real deal when it comes to, national security issues or international issues. And that shows that TikTok has achieved its goal in separating all of America from the real information and being able to manipulate what they think and believe, right?
That is correct. We have research that shows it.
Yeah.
The National Contagion Research Institute, NCRI,
Hmm.
has research that shows how TikTok is influencing people at speeds that we have never seen before.
Hmm.
And with AI getting stronger and stronger, it's only going to get worse.
Okay. So this is a good move. We're happy today.
We're happy today. This
Okay.
is a great day for American democracy. It's a great day for our national security, and it's a great day for our kids' future.
Thank you, Rick. This was such an important convo. I hope everyone comes away a little more educated, and I'll include a link to the news today, but also to that research that you mentioned so that parents can dig into it. Don't just take our word for it.
Right, correct.
Thanks, Rick.